Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show, along with Zach Meisel. I'm Adam the Bull, not in my home studio today. I'm down at the UCSS building. And obviously, we'll be talking about the breaking Cavs news on UCSS at 11 o'clock with Donovan Mitchell signing. We're happy about that. But we're here to talk Guardians. And for once, Zach, it was not pretty this weekend. We got a lot to get to on that. You got one word to sum up this past weekend against Kansas City?
I do.
Yeah, what
barbecue.
Is it? I do want to hear about that. That's all coming up on today's Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show, plus a big announcement in just a minute. So before we get to this barbecue breakdown, we got to break down the fact that the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show is expanding. We are going to 2 days a week. The demand has been high for Guardians content. Zach was hesitant because he said, listen, the radio stations in this town are doing a great job covering baseball. And I don't know if there's room for more content. There you go. We got, and that was your thought, but we decided to push through even with that. And so now we're going to be on Mondays and Fridays. Now, you may say, well, today is not a Monday or Friday. It's a Tuesday. Yes, this week's been a little weird. And, you know, Zach's schedule is crazy because he travels the country and he's busy a lot. And I'm a lunatic, so you never know what's going on with me. So occasionally it'll change. But for the rest of the season, we will be doing 2 Ultimate Guardian shows a week. Most weeks, they'll be Monday and Friday at 9:30 a.m. Little flexibility on the days and times sometimes, but for the most part, Monday, Friday at 9:30 a.m. But I've had so much fun doing this with you, Zach, that I'm really excited that we're expanding to 2 days a week.
Bull, do you think this would happen if the team was 30-52?
No.
Would there be that?
No, because there wouldn't, obviously the Guardians, like the Cavs in this town, the interest grows. We know the Browns, even if they suck, there's still a lot of interest. It's just the way it is. The Guardians and Cavs are more reliable, or it's more reliant on success. And fortunately, for people who like talking Guardians baseball like you and I, this franchise, at least since you've been covering the team, since I've been covering the team, has had a lot more success than failure in terms of overall. They haven't won the ultimate prize, we know, but for the most part, they've been a successful franchise. But they were not this weekend.
No. It's also been a fun season to analyze. Like, they've played a more entertaining brand of baseball. Like, last year was brutal to watch. 2021, painful to watch.
Yeah.
And I do think the way they've played and some of the personalities on the team have drawn more people in. We've seen it in the attendance. I think they've definitely captured the city's attention here, and they need to keep going. They have to build on that. You can't just take it for granted here. And I think this past weekend kind of illustrates that. But it's look, we went into this not having any idea what this would be. We've liked talking baseball with each other in the past when we got to do it. So it's cool. It's cool that people bought in and they
I'm excited you wanted to do a second day. I know your schedule's busy, and so I appreciate that. It's a lot of fun. And so we'll continue to have fun with all of you. I know our live numbers have been big. Today we're a little lower because we were off schedule this week, but it'll pick up, and the views after we've gone off have been huge. And there is a baseball fan base in this town, and as you said, we're seeing it. They're coming out. The attendance has been fantastic for a while now. They sold out the Wednesday game against the awful White Sox. Yeah. Turned out nicely that if you bought those tickets, now you get to see Gavin Williams make his season debut. By the way, a little note on that. Why do you think they didn't, when they first sent down McKenzie, why didn't they call up a relief pitcher for a couple of days before activating Williams?
So Williams was on, you get a 30-day rehab window. And that 30, I mean, they pushed it.
Okay. Yeah.
They pushed it as far as I could. I thought it was like 31, 32 days. Oh. So he had to be activated or optioned to AAA.
Makes sense. Okay, that's the answer. I was like, why didn't they just call a reliever for a few days? All right, but now Zach has the easy answer there. But let's go back first and recap this past weekend. It was very representative in some ways of what we've seen for a while in terms of They got a great performance by Bybee, and then the other days you're kind of holding your breath a little bit. But what was missing this weekend is the clutch hitting. They did not hit in the clutch. They didn't hit much at all outside of that one game. So the pitching that failed for them, the starters were kind of, we'll get to that in a minute, but any concern about the hitting, or it's like, hey, to me, it's just like, they can't be great every game. You knew there was going to be a little bit of a lull at some point. I'm not overly worried. Are you?
Well, remember when we were having the conversation of should they add another hitter or are they
Yes.
fine? And we said, no, even if you have a great offense,
Right.
if there is a hitter who you can obtain who fits into what you have, add it. And I think they're missing someone to hit second. I don't think Schneeman's the answer. I don't think Freeman's the answer. Andres Jimenez has not hit up to his standards. So you could go get someone who you could plug into the number 2 spot, or you could get someone who can hit fourth and you can slide everybody up one. But
Right.
they're still missing another hitter to just like string together that top half of the lineup to fill in the last missing piece, I guess. And I think that's apparent. I mean, it's, Quan wasn't going to hit 398 forever. He's come back to earth a little bit, but you like what he can give you. Obviously, Ramirez keeps going. Josh Naylor has been pretty solid. So if you can just get, and even David Fry is still hitting 310.
Yeah.
And has a great OPS. So if you could just get one more hitter, like to be the glue there, to solidify a top 5 in the lineup that's really good, I think you can piece together the bottom half. But they need more. Like, I think what faulted them over the weekend were the same things that have been the issues in the past. It's when they don't get those clutch hits, sometimes the offense can be a little lackluster, and the starting pitching has been a problem and will continue to be a problem.
Before we get back to the starting pitching and Triston McKenzie going down, something I've been thinking about now for a little bit, and that's Andres Jimenez. Andres Jimenez came to the Guardians, and the first year we had him, he played in 2021. He played 68 games. Nothing special offensively. We saw the great defense, right? Then 2022, the guy was magnificent. Finished 6th in the MVP. Did everything well. Was a superstar. Last year, he was okay. And this year, he's been, I guess, okay offensively.
I don't even think that. I
yeah,
think he's
I
been
guess you're
a little
right.
worse than that.
Are you starting to, he got paid off of that All-Star campaign in 2022. And yes, he's great defensively, and he's not Miles Straw at the plate. He's not Austin Hedges at the plate. He's not that level of bad. But I think we may have to come to a realization here that contract that we were all excited about might not be as good as we thought it was. And he's still young, and it's, we've seen guys in baseball have a couple of down years and then bounce back. But overall in Cleveland, he's been, in 3 of his 4 years, and now, again, his first year was 60-something games. So far this year is half a season. But in 3 of the 4 years here, he's been, I'd say, an average to below average hitter.
It's weird. I was looking at his metrics, comparing them to that 22 season. I mean, a big thing is he just does not hit the ball hard ever. And he doesn't have quite the Quan skill set where that doesn't matter. Quan knows he's going to hit the exact pitch that he wants to hit because his eye is so good. His pitch recognition is so good. And Jimenez isn't quite there. Jimenez does not walk. So he's making a lot of weak contact on pitches that the pitcher wants him to swing at. I think that's his issue. And it's weird. Like, some of the metrics would tell you that he has had some bad luck this season, which fine. But when you don't hit the ball hard, you can't bank on getting rewarded.
That's fair.
And I think even 2 years ago, he's still the average exit velocity, the hard hit rate, that stuff, it was low, but it's bottom of the leaderboard now.
Yeah.
And I don't really, that's they pay hitting coaches to fix this. They don't pay me to try to fix this. But they need more from him. Even if he can be a league average hitter, which he ended up being about last season after he got hot at the end. You pair that with being like the best defender in the league and a guy who can steal 30 bases, that's a really valuable player.
Yes.
But they need more than what he's giving them now. I think his OPS plus is like 85, which means he's basically been 15% worse than a league average hitter. And the other thing you have to consider, and this is for down the road, and there's a lot that could change, but the way they structure these contracts, and I get it to an extent, but part of me doesn't. They backload everything. Like guys who have extensions like this, you make more and more each year that passes. I mean, Miles Straw was the same thing. And the thing that made me scratch my head when they gave Miles Straw the extension was, you knew that he was an elite defender in center field, and you knew that he was not much of a hitter. And yet you're going to pay him more the older he gets when he's going to slow down and the defense isn't going to be as good. He's not going to be able to steal as many bases when he gets older. It's the same thing with Jimenez. Like, you're going to be paying him the most money when he's in his 30s. And is he going to be an elite defender then? Is he going to be stealing 30 bases then? So you need him to hit to just be able to carry that value forward.
We're always talking about the ownership spending money. And in fact, I don't know if you saw this, but somebody put out, I don't know if it was Bleacher Report or Barstool Cleveland or something. And it was like, Guardians, this record with this low a payroll. And I always get bothered by those because it's almost like the players should be maybe proud of that. The manager, that's a kudos to him, even the front office to a degree. But I don't like to celebrate that because it praises the owner for being cheap.
You didn't hear? You get 1.5 banners if you win a championship with a bottom 10 payroll.
Exactly. That sums it up. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. And nobody wants to like every time I talk about payroll, I'll have somebody that tweet at me and will say, you want them to be the Mets where they spend $300 million and they stink? I'd like the Guardians to spend more money means I want them to be the Mets. If the Guardians were willing to spend more money, does that mean all of a sudden Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff become stupid? They don't know what they're doing anymore. Like I believe in the Guardians front office. They've not that they haven't made mistakes. Everybody does, but they've proven that they're amongst the best of their peers in the sport. So giving them more money to work with could only help. There's no downside to get this idea. Well, you're bringing these guys and maybe bad chemistry because you're paying superstars, and their payroll could be $150 million. They're still not getting the biggest superstars in the game.
If they had the choice, if Chris Antonetti had the choice, he would prefer to have a $200 million payroll than a $100 million payroll.
Of course,
right?
Every person on the planet would.
Think about, like, they've had a lot of free agent flops. Josh Bell and Mike Zunino a year ago, but there are so many more. Whether it's like Hanley Ramirez, Carlos Gonzalez, Domingo Santana, Eddie Rosario, so many flops. And why? Because they have to pick and choose from the bottom of the barrel.
That's right.
And it's really hard to find a winner there. For every Mike Napoli, there are 10 Boone Logans. And it's like it's really tough to find gems there when you're looking on that aisle. Whereas if you had flexibility, like, it's easier to the guy getting 4 years for $80 million is more. I know Nick Swisher and Michael Bourne didn't work out here, but that player is more likely to work out than the guy who you're signing for 1 for 10 because nobody else wants it.
Right. And it also allows you, the higher your payroll is, the more you can make up for mistakes. Because look at the Jimenez contract, for example, as you talked about. Let's look at this contract right now. So Jimenez is only making $5.6 million this year. That's nothing, right? So no big deal. Next year he makes 10.5. In 2026 he makes 15.5. 2027 through 2029, as you alluded to, his age 28, 29, and 30 season, he makes $23.5 million. Right now, it feels like those 3 years are going to be a disaster.
Yeah, and
eventually,
a lot can change. I mean, he's young. This is his age 25 season, which 100%. Is incredible.
Yes.
But that is the big point you made is that they've said this. They make a mistake, it cripples them for a while. The Swisher and Bourne deals didn't work out, and they had to dump them and get Chris Johnson's salary in return, and they were paying him for a while. Remember, they traded Josh Bell last year.
Yeah.
they had to get Gene Segura, and they're paying him $8.5 million this year, and he's sitting on a yacht in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
So, like, and those things, they matter. Like, Gene Segura is making 9% of this team's payroll. So it's unfortunate that has to be the case, where if they slip up, then that costs them. They can't just be like, okay, we made a mistake here. This money's out of the way. Let's use it on something else. Whereas every other team can do that.
Right. It's a huge advantage. When Yankee fans would always say to me, I would talk about their payroll advantage. And nowadays, the Yankees don't really have that much of an advantage over the other big teams. But back in the day when the Yankees were spending and other teams really weren't like that, a lot of fans would always say to me, well, but we got a bunch of homegrown players, which when the Yankees were at the peak of their powers in the late 90s, they were. Most of their best players were homegrown. But they were able to keep them all because the payroll essentially was unlimited for them at the time.
That's a big thing, too, is if you had room for a $150 million payroll, I think you'd have Tanner Bybee signed to an extension. I think you'd have Stephen Kwan signed to an extension, maybe Josh Naylor. So that's a big part of it, too.
All right, let's get to the starting rotation. Let's start with Triston McKenzie. We've been talking about him for a couple of weeks. We've talked about him going to the bullpen. We've talked about the possibility of sending him down. The Guardians keep insisting that this has nothing to do with injury, that it's nothing to do with him not having the surgery. An argument on their behalf would be, and I think you referenced this in your recent article about it, that in fact you did, because that's where I read it. So you talked about the fact his last 3 starts, his average velocity was the highest it's been. But I mean, he's throwing the ball right down the middle, so straight fastball. So do you believe that a trip to Columbus can help Triston McKenzie? And do you think they'll keep him in the rotation there? Because I think they should move him to the bullpen there. But go ahead.
You brought that up last week, and I hadn't thought of it, and I do like that idea. It is also predicated on them being able to acquire a starting pitcher, I think,
absolutely,
at the trade deadline. And I don't think you need to make that decision yet. He's going to start. I think he's starting Friday for Columbus. Betty didn't think he'd be pitching against the Toledo Mud Hens in July, but that's where he's at. It worked in 21. Like, he went down to AAA. He needed a reset. He came up, and then I think he had like a 7-start stretch that August and September where he was absolutely dominant. And the formula is easy to figure out here. Really good curveball, good slider. How do you get to those pitches? Because if you throw the curveball for the first pitch, a hitter is going to it drops out of the zone, right? So you're not going to swing at that. So he needs to get ahead with his fastball. And that's the one thing he hasn't been able to do. Now, why? Is it because he was nibbling because he was throwing at 89 miles an hour early in the season? He didn't want it to get crushed? Or is it because the mechanics aren't right and he can't consistently throw the ball where he wants to? Why aren't the mechanics right? Is it because he's injured? He says no. Manager says no. Team president says no. So we have to take them at their word. And that's, the guy missed last season. I think it's understandable that there was rust and it's difficult to get a consistent delivery down and do exactly what you want to do and make adjustments in the middle of a start. But the key is, and this is like the stat that I think tells the whole story here, because he's been effective throwing a 91 mile an hour fastball before. I don't think that's the velocity is the end all be all here, but he has already given up more home runs on his fastball this season than he did in 2022 or 2021. And those years he threw like more than twice as many fastballs as he's thrown so far this season. So the pitch is just getting annihilated, and it's getting annihilated because he falls behind an account. And when he's down 2-0 in a count, he can't throw a curveball. No one's chasing that down 2-0. Right, yeah. So he has to throw a fastball, and the hitter knows it. And so they're sitting on it, and it's 92 down the middle, and they crush it. And it's the key is he's just got to pitch ahead. When he pitches ahead, they chase that stuff, and there's nothing the hitter can do. His chase rate this season ranks in the 4th percentile in the league. So, and he's giving up so, like, the hard contact metrics are just off the charts. So it's an easy formula to figure out. The question is, going to AAA, can you trick yourself into thinking it's a major league start and attack these hitters? And even though it's more difficult to attack Aaron Judge than some 26-year-old scrub on the Mud Hens,
Yeah.
You just have to carry that same confidence into a major league start.
No doubt. We'll look. I want to talk about Gavin Williams in a minute. I gave you a Guardians Cubs trade idea last week. I got another one for you that I like even more for the Guardians in just a second. But first, real quick, let me talk to you about FanDuel, folks. It's winner take all time. There's a lot of baseball. There's soccer going on, all kinds of exciting things. Right now, new customers at FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/UCSS and make every shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Zach. Are you ready for another Cubs-Guardians proposed trade?
Boy, the Brewers are getting the last laugh in that Craig Counsell flip.
Kudos to them. They are I'm not even going to blame Craig Counsell, although you got to give him some blame. The Cubs should be better than they are, but they're terrible, and they need to sell, in my opinion. So last week I brought up the possibility of Jameson Taillon and Cody Bellinger, and I've been thinking about this, and I got a better trade for the Guardians because Bellinger's having a bad season, and the Guardians are just not going to take a chance if he doesn't opt out. You know what I mean? So I got an even better combo of Cub players that I like for the Guardians. Still Jameson Taillon, who I think helps. He's a good middle of the rotation starter. He's having a fantastic season.
He's also a great quote, I've learned. So I'm
yes,
all aboard.
Yes. So there you go. That's perfect for you. And the other guy I want the Guardians to get for the Cubs, which could solve an issue they've had for a number of years now, Nico Hoerner. Nico Hoerner came up as a shortstop. He's been playing a Gold Glove level second base for the Cubs, but he's a natural shortstop, and he's played shortstop, and he still plays shortstop. In fact, Dansby Swanson was on the injured list earlier this season, and Hoerner was playing shortstop. Hoerner might be the best second baseman defensively in the league, not named Andres Jimenez. So a defensive middle infield of Hoerner and Jimenez probably be the best in baseball. And Hoerner can hit. Now, he's not having a great season offensively so far this year. He's got similar numbers to Jimenez. He's got a 682 OPS.
He's got those traits they love, though.
Oh,
doesn't
absolutely.
Ever swing and miss, tons of contact.
He fits what they do. He fits the type of team they like, and what they don't have, he's a right-handed hitter. And he can run. Last year he hasn't stole as many bases this year, but last year I think he stole 50 bases or something like that. How many steals did he have last year?
Looks like 43.
43. So he's got 14. You know, it's not like he's not stealing at all, but doesn't get caught very often. And he's got some power. He 9 home runs last year, 10 the year before that. So he's on pace for about 10 again this year. So he can get you double-digit home runs. Like I said, high-level Gold Glove defense. And you look at his contract, Zach, he is owed. They've got him locked up through to the 2026 season. He's getting $11.5 million this year. So you're paying him, $5.5 million, $6 million. 11.5 next year, and then $12 million in 2026. Very reasonable for the kind of player he is. I think if they got Taillon and Hoerner, that would be now. You give the Cubs, maybe you give it Cubs Arias into the deal, or Tana, or whoever they like as your shortstop. You give Rocchio, whoever they want in that.
Give them anyone because you're
right,
done.
Because now you're gonna have Jimenez and Hoerner as your middle infield for the rest of this year and the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a rental, and it's not even just next year. You got him, and then after next year, maybe you trade him. Who knows? But you have him under control for 3 years, 3 playoff races potentially. What do you think?
Do you think who they choose with the first pick? I know you don't ever draft for need.
Right. You don't think about that with baseball.
But with the first pick and being a contender,
Yeah.
it's a weird spot. And I just, if they take the kid from Oregon State, Bazana, who's a second baseman, you would think the guy could be up here in a year.
Yep, that's true.
Does that make you just run with this experiment with all these middle infielders until that guy's ready? Does it prevent you from making a trade like this?
I don't think it should, because at the let's say they run into this problem. Let's say they draft Bazana and he's so good they need him in the big leagues by a year from now. Well, then I could trade Nico Hoerner again.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So, like, I'd rather be in a situation where they have too many good middle infielders than the situation they're in now where they don't have enough.
They have enough. We don't know if any of them are good.
Well, enough good ones. I
was looking around the clubhouse the other day, and I was trying to count how many guys came up as middle infielders.
Yeah.
I don't think I had enough fingers and toes.
I know. But I think Hoerner fits this team perfectly.
Yeah. The thing is, when you stockpile that many middle infielders, you should have one as good as Nico Hoerner, but
they don't.
We haven't seen it yet.
Nope. And we'll see. And then whoever they send to the Cubs, that guy gets a chance to play every day. It's I don't know. We'll see. But
Cubs.
I keep thinking. I think the Cubs are a good match for the Guardians. I think the Blue Jays are a good match for the Guardians. And
they're the perfect examples of. I think everyone's freaking out. I mean, I've heard this from front office people too. Like, I heard a National League trade that was proposed last week, and there was a starting pitcher involved, and the team with the starting pitcher asked for like an up and coming star, and it was the most lopsided offer I've ever heard.
Right,
and that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Granted, we're 4 weeks from the trade deadline, and there's only a handful of teams that are clear-cut sellers. So they have so much power right now.
Right.
But what's going to be interesting is, we've been recycling the same few names over and over. But you're going to get to a point here where the Cubs start saying, you know what, we're selling. And then there's a bunch of names to add to the pile.
Right.
Maybe the Reds fall into that. The National League West, like the Giants, the Diamondbacks.
Right. And those teams actually have better players than the team, because the teams like the White Sox, the A's, the teams we've been talking about have so few good players that can really help. But teams like the Cubs, the Reds, the Giants, these teams have Blue Jays, certainly.
Tampa is fascinating.
Who is that?
Tampa.
Oh, Tampa, sure.
Yeah.
Well, Randy Arozarena, I know he's having a bad year, but he could be an interesting guy. So yeah, there's some, and we talked about, and then once you start adding teams like that, well, then you have some interesting relief pitchers that come into the mix, because if the Guardians can't find the right starters, maybe they, as we talked about last week, maybe they bulk up the bullpen even more, so it'll be interesting to see what they do.
I honestly, maybe there's a world where Bybee, Williams, and somebody, Lively, I guess, McKenzie maybe, you can survive in the playoffs. You can lean on your bullpen, go get another good arm, like Tanner Scott or something, and you can ride it like you did in 2016, ride the bullpen to the World Series. I don't know. I mean, that's not far-fetched, I guess.
No, it's not crazy.
But the issue is, I don't know that you can survive 162 games as currently constructed with this rotation.
No.
So you need like a Tyone or someone who maybe isn't overpowering and dominating, but can just, that dude can give you 6 innings. That is a huge need.
Yes.
Just for the next 3 months.
Yeah, and I've talked about, I want him to get 2 starters, even if Gavin Williams looks good and he's pitching well, because of that very thing. Mm-hmm. Not only to eat innings in the regular season, but to prevent the bullpen from getting overworked. They have a bunch of their key guys that have worked so many games and so many innings. Eventually, it's going to take a toll. It's just a matter of time.
And Matthew Boyd is just insurance.
Yeah.
He needed a team that was going to help him get healthy and put him in the right environment to set him up for free agency this winter. So, of course, he's going to say, well, Cleveland is the perfect place to go. This is what they do. And for the Guardians, it's like, well, we don't know how the trade deadline is going to work out.
Right.
Here's a guy who can do something for us for the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season. So we'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
But that's, you can't bank on that guy starting game 3 for you at Camden Yards.
Folks, by the way, if you're just joining us now, Welcome to a special Tuesday edition of the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. We announced earlier that Zach and I will be doing the show now twice a week starting this week. Our next episode will be Friday, and then next week we'll be back to our regular Monday and then Friday. But Friday at 9:30 a.m. will be our next show. 2 shows a week. We'll see how they do against the White Sox. Got the White Sox this week. Big sellout crowd Wednesday. We talked about it.
Don't have to see Crochet.
They're missing. That's right. They're facing what? Fetty, Thorpe, and then what's his name? Terrible pitcher going.
Your boy Chris Flexen.
Yeah, Flexen, right? My boy Chris Flexen. Yeah, in my parlay today, I got both Jose and Quan over 1.5 total bases. So we'll see. Quick, let's go to the questions from the fans here. I'm not talking about the Mitchell extension, Dallas. We'll talk about that on the main show later. Let's see. Nikki V, do you think acquiring Taylor Ward and Eric Fetty would be realistic?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, like the White Sox, there's no point in them hanging on to Fetty, who's been really good.
Right.
The Angels,
you never know with them.
You never know what they're doing. They're so in their own bubble. But they should trade Taylor Ward, and I think he'd be a good fit.
Yeah. I think both those players make sense for the Guardians at the right price, no doubt. When I'd like to see the Guardians get one pitcher that's a no doubt guy you're going to use as a starter in the playoffs. But the other pitcher could just be a guy to eat innings and be a 4th, 5th starter that you might not even use in the postseason or you use out of the pen. Let's see. Joy Fitz, sticks out of the bullpen could be solid, but who would get moved down from this top bullpen? Good.
Well, it's crazy because I was even thinking, and if you can't get the top line starting pitcher, can you? Like, I don't know that anyone's actually going to trade for Mason Miller in Oakland. That guy is just exceptional. But Oakland also can hold out for a huge haul because he's got like 5 years of team control. Yeah. But if you can go get someone, they're still going to get Sandlin back here soon. Yeah. Eli Morgan's back now. Like,
what's
there are
check status, by the way. What is happening with him?
Knows. Yeah. Last I heard, he was suntanning at Crocker Park. They said that he was struggling to get his velocity back. So who knows? It is a good question. Like, it's a good problem to have, like you said. And you get to the playoffs too, and you can have 13 pitchers on the roster. You don't need 5 starters, so you can have a bullpen with 9 guys, 10 guys. Yeah. There's room for another setup man if you can find one.
Yeah. There's always a spot. And by the way, like, guys are going to get hurt. That's just the reality of the situation. Guys are going to spend time on the IL. And Eli Morgan hasn't been very good so far this year. I mean, we'll see what happens with him. Anthony says, y'all think Bybee can be our ace for the next 5 years?
I think in an ideal, like him and Gavin Williams, when they came up together, it was that friendly rivalry, it was a healthy competition. Right. There was spring training last season. Those guys would pitch on the backfield. They weren't in big league camp. So you had 2 guys in minor league camp, far away from everybody else. And like the big league team would go play their game at Goodyear Ballpark against the Reds, and Bybee and Williams would throw bullpen sessions at noon, and everyone in the front office would go watch. And it was like, all right, Williams just threw 12 curveballs in a row, and they were all amazing. And then Bybee threw 12 slide, like they'd be going back and forth. So that's to say that there is a world where those guys are your 1 and 2 in some order. And if they're both living up to their potential, that's a great 1-2 punch to have at the top. Mm-hmm. You'd love to have fully healthy, functioning McKenzie as your 3 as well, because we've seen what he can do when he's in peak form. But we haven't seen Williams, and he's going to need to knock some rust off and get back into the swings of things. But I think, I think Bybee has looked like an ace for the last few weeks. Yeah. You'd love to have another guy who's at that level too.
He has to be consistently averaging a little more in terms of the innings, but everything else about him is screams ace or borderline ace, going forward. Let's see. Nick says Taillon and Bellinger for the Cubs. Nikki says, I feel like the Cubs have so many larger contracts. They won't go into a full rebuild. No, the Cubs are not going to go into a full rebuild, which means, they're not going to trade Shota Imanaga. But I think they would trade Nico Hoerner in the right deal. I don't think they necessarily think he's their 10-year answer at shortstop. And the reality is they have the money. If they want, they could bring him back when he became a free agent. I don't know. I mean, listen, maybe the Cubs won't trade him. I'm not sure, but that'd be a guy. I'm just right now I'm thinking about what the Guardians' needs are, and that was a guy I was interested in for them. Final thoughts there, Zach.
Yeah, so I was in an Uber on the way to the airport to leave Kansas City.
Yeah, the barbecue.
And
yeah.
And this driver was very chatty, and we were talking about barbecue in Kansas City and going through all the places. He said he gave someone a ride that weekend who was from Chicago and was celebrating their own birthday and flew to Kansas City by themselves with a top 10 list of Kansas City barbecue spots printed out. And he was spending like 4 days alone going to all 10 places.
That seems very depressing to me. I feel sad.
It seemed very sad. I also, that is not a style of food I think I could eat for 10 straight meals.
No.
And I was wondering if there was anything that you could do.
I could do, well, despite my weight, it is hard for me to like eat too much food too often. I know people might laugh at that, but it's unlike what it used to be. When I was younger, I could put it down even more. It's just harder to lose it now. But anyway, yeah, I do believe that I could eat if I had to do that, it would be pizza in New York. Now you may say, well, you are from New York. That's true, but most of my life in New York was when I was, a kid till I was 25. So 1971 to 1995, right? Well, that's pre-internet, or for the most part it is. So I didn't know where the best pizzerias were. I knew we had good pizza in Brooklyn where I lived, but I went to my neighborhood pizza joints. I didn't go find all these different pizzerias in the area that are great.
So you're saying if you could guarantee it was top shelf, you could eat it 10 straight meals?
I could go to between New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Long Island. I got all these pizzerias. I have some that I've been to already and some that I haven't that I want to try. I could do that 10 days in a row and do like pizza tour 10 days in a row. See, but I couldn't do barbecue. I love barbecue, but not 10 days in a row. And I think even a pizza 10 days in a row would be a little much.
Well, this was 10 meals in 4 days. And
yeah.
And I don't know if he was pigging out at each spot, but sure. I always go to Joe's, which is it's probably the most famous spot they have. And
right.
It's like connected to a gas station. And you don't think you're eating a ton, and then you don't want anything to do with food for 24 hours after the meal. That's how this was.
Is that where you went when you were in Kansas City this time?
Yeah, and and there's, Q39 is an awesome spot. This Arthur Bryant's is classic. It's really good.
What's your go-to choice? What do you get there when you went to this place this weekend?
So the famous thing that everybody gets is the Z-Man sandwich, which is just pulled pork. It's got onion rings on top. Their brisket's good. It's, you can't go wrong. And they give you if you get fries as your side, they give you 1,000 of them.
Well, and here's the thing with barbecue versus pizza too. If you were eating it every day, with pizza, in theory, you could just eat one slice, right? Because it's not I got to try this. I know some people.
There's no way to eat barbecue lightly,
right? Because I want to try the ribs and I want to try the brisket and you got chicken wings and it's all these different type of foods, and it's just so heavy.
No one ever said. You wake up in the morning, you have a leftover slice of cold pizza, but you're not waking up in the morning having a leftover 3 slices of brisket. Or maybe you are. I don't know.
You could. I sometimes take leftover corned beef, not barbecue, but there's some barbecue places that have corned beef, but sometimes if I get a corned beef sandwich, I'll have it in the morning and I'll put it in my eggs. So I don't know. You could eat it. I'm not going to lie. I had barbecue this weekend here in Cleveland at Sweet Pork Wilson's, which is my place here, and I had some leftover ribs in the morning. I did, but I'm an unusual fella, so what are you gonna do?
Well, it's insight like that landed us a second show every week.
That's right. And for those who just joined us, I'm glad Zach brought it up again. Starting this week, now 2 Ultimate Cleveland Guardian shows per week. Our next one will be Friday at 9:30 a.m. And if you miss it, you can watch it anytime on YouTube. When's your next podcast with TJ, by the way?
It's a great question because he's on vacation with the family.
Where is he? Where'd he go?
I think they went to Myrtle Beach, and then they were stopping in Tennessee on the way back.
Well, why didn't he wait till the All-Star break at this point? What's going on?
He usually does this over the trade deadline, so this was preferred.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I was like, when I made the plan, I'm going to Seattle towards the end of July, and we're actually getting back the day of the trade deadline, which was not ideal. But I don't know why I wasn't thinking about it. Usually I think about those things all the time. When I booked this, we hadn't even started the show yet, so I didn't know about that. But even from UCSS standpoint, but I think I'm going to take my laptop with me on the trip. So if we have breaking Guardians news, might bust in and do a Guardian show, even though I'm on vacation. I don't mind. It's a relaxing.
That trip's going to be insane. I mean, they go to Philly the weekend before the deadline, then they're in Detroit Monday night and Tuesday afternoon. But the deadline's, I think, Tuesday at 6 p.m. So maybe you see Brian Rocchio get yanked from the game in the middle of an inning because he got traded.
Exciting. I don't know why they don't do it like have the trade deadline on a Monday and nobody plays that day.
It's weird. They're off the day after. It's so weird.
They're off on a Wednesday?
Uh-huh.
Very unusual. Can't figure out Major League Baseball sometimes. Zach, great stuff as always, and we'll see you again this week on Friday for the next Ultimate Cleveland Guardian show. See you, everyone.